The dust devil rose like a vengeful spirit from the desert floor, spinning Clara Whitmore's torn skirts as she stumbled through the scorching sand. Her lips were cracked, bleeding from 3 days without water, and her once pristine morning dress hung in tatters. Behind her, the town of Redemption Creek had become nothing more than a wavering mirage in the heat, its people having driven her out with stones and curses. Widow Witch, they'd called her. Husband killer. Clara's fingers trembled as she clutched the small leather pouch at her waist, all she'd managed to save from her home before the mob arrived. Inside were her mother's silver thimble, a handful of coins, and the brass button that had torn from Samuel's coat when he'd fallen from the cliff. She hadn't pushed him. God knew she hadn't, though after 5 years of his fists and fury, no one would believe her. The sun hammered down mercilessly on the Arizona territory, turning the red rocks into furnaces and the sand into burning coals beneath her boots. Clara had removed her bonnet hours ago when the black fabric had begun to feel like an iron pressing against her skull. Her auburn hair, once pinned in proper fashion, now hung wild about her shoulders, bleached lighter by the desert sun. She fell to her knees beside a weathered Joshua tree, its twisted arms offering no shade in the noon heat. Her throat felt like she'd swallowed sand and glass. Death would come soon. She knew. Perhaps it would be kinder than what awaited her if she returned to any town where her story had spread. Through her sun-blinded vision, she thought she saw a rider approaching, a dark silhouette against the shimmering horizon. Clara tried to call out, but only a rasping whisper emerged. The figure drew closer, and she realized this was no hallucination. A man on a dun-colored horse, moving with the easy grace of someone born to the saddle. Cole Danner had been tracking a mountain lion that had been killing his livestock when he spotted the woman. At first, he'd thought she was dead, another victim of the desert's cruel appetite. But then he saw her hand move, fingers grasping weakly at the sand. He dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jingling softly as his boots hit the ground. 34 years in this harsh land had taught him to read its moods and dangers, but nothing had prepared him for the sight of this woman, clearly Eastern bred despite her current state, with delicate features that spoke of drawing rooms rather than desert survival. "Ma'am?" His voice was rough from disuse. Living alone meant days could pass without speaking to anything but his horse and the occasional rattlesnake. Clara's green eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glazed with fever. She recoiled when she saw him, pressing back against the Joshua tree's trunk as if it might swallow her whole. "Please," she whispered, though whether she begged for help or mercy, even she didn't know. Cole uncapped his canteen and knelt beside her, moving slowly as he would with a spooked mare. "Easy now. Just water." He tilted the canteen carefully to her lips, watching as she drank with desperate, painful gulps. Too much too fast would make her sick, so he pulled it away despite her whimper of protest. "What's your name?" he asked, though he suspected she might be past answering. "Clara." Her voice was barely audible. "Clara Whitmore." The name stirred something in his memory. Whitmore. He'd heard it last month during his rare trip to town for supplies. The merchant's wife had been gossiping about some scandal in Redemption Creek, a woman whose husband had died under mysterious circumstances. Rumors of witchcraft, of a temptress who lured men to their doom. Looking at the half-dead creature before him, Cole found it hard to reconcile the gossip with reality. She looked like she'd been through hell and was still burning. He made his decision quickly. His cabin was still 8 miles through the canyon, and she wouldn't survive the journey conscious. "I'm going to help you," he said, not asking permission. "Don't fight me." Clara's eyes widened with fear as he reached for her, but she was too weak to resist when he lifted her into his arms. She weighed next to nothing, bird bones and desperation. Her head lolled against his shoulder, and he could feel the fever radiating from her skin. Cole settled her across his saddle and mounted behind her, one arm securing her against his chest. The horse, well-trained and steady, didn't protest the extra burden. As they began the journey to his cabin, Cole found himself wondering what kind of fool thing he was doing, bringing a stranger, a woman with a dangerous reputation, into his solitary life. He'd come to the desert to escape his own past, his own accusations. The last thing he needed was someone else's trouble. But leaving her to die went against something fundamental in him. Some code absorbed from his mother before she'd passed when he was 12. The ride seemed endless, though the sun was only beginning its descent toward the western peaks when they reached the narrow canyon that led to his homestead. Clara had drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally mumbling words he couldn't understand. Once, she'd gripped his shirt and said clearly, "I didn't push him. The rocks were loose. I didn't." Cole's jaw tightened. He knew about accusations, about how truth mattered less than what people wanted to believe. His own past proved that well enough. The cabin appeared like a modest salvation against the canyon wall, built from local stone and timber he'd hauled from the mountains. With a well he'd dug himself and a small corral for his horses. It wasn't much, but it was defensible and private, which was all he'd wanted when he'd built it 3 years ago. He carried Clara inside and laid her on his narrow bed, the only one in the single-room structure. She looked impossibly fragile against the rough wool blankets, her skin flushed with fever and sunburn. Cole fetched more water and clean cloth, then hesitated. Propriety dictated he shouldn't tend to her beyond the basics, but propriety had no place when someone was dying. He worked carefully, cooling her fever with damp cloths and coaxing more water between her cracked lips. Her dress was beyond salvaging, torn and stained with blood from various scrapes and cuts. He left it on her but cleaned what wounds he could reach, noting the older bruises on her arms, purple and yellow marks that spoke of violence that had nothing to do with her flight through the desert. Night fell like a curtain across the canyon, bringing blessed coolness and a symphony of coyote calls. Cole lit a lamp and sat in his only chair, watching the woman breathe. She'd survived this long. She might make it through the night. He found himself studying her face in the lamplight, trying to see the witch the townspeople feared. All he saw was a woman who'd been broken by circumstances and cruelty. Much like, he cut off that line of thinking. The past was buried, and he intended to keep it that way. Clara stirred just before dawn, her eyes focusing with difficulty on the unfamiliar surroundings. Rough wooden beams above her, stone walls, the smell of leather and coffee, and something indefinably masculine. When she turned her head and saw Cole sitting nearby, she tensed. "You're safe," he said quietly, setting aside the coffee cup he'd been nursing. "You're in my cabin, about 15 miles from Redemption Creek. You," her voice was still raw. "You helped me. Why?" It was a fair question. Cole considered his answer. "Didn't seem right, leaving you to die. Whatever you did or didn't do, the desert's no place for justice." Clara's eyes filled with tears she was too exhausted to shed. "I need to leave. If they find me here, they'll—" "They won't." His tone brooked no argument. "You're in no shape to travel, and this place isn't easy to find unless you know where to look. Rest now. We'll figure out the rest later." She wanted to protest. He could see it in her eyes, pride and fear warring with necessity, but exhaustion won, pulling her back under before she could voice her objections. Cole returned to his chair, settling in for another long watch. He'd brought trouble into his sanctuary. He knew that. But looking at her sleeping form, at the way her fingers clutched the blanket like a lifeline, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. Not yet. The sun rose over the canyon walls, painting the rocks in shades of gold and crimson. Another day in the desert, harsh and beautiful and utterly indifferent to human struggles. But for now, in this small cabin carved from the wilderness, 2 damaged souls had found an unlikely refuge. Whether it would prove to be salvation or damnation remained to be seen. The days that followed passed in an uneasy rhythm. Clara had insisted on leaving the bed after the 3rd day, despite Cole's protests that she needed more rest. She'd fashioned a makeshift dress from one of his old shirts and a blanket, her ruined morning clothes now serving as cleaning rags. Pride, Cole recognized, was sometimes all a person had left. She moved about the cabin quietly, learning its sparse geography, the water barrel by the door, The cast-iron stove that served for cooking and heat. The rough-hewn table where Cole took his meals, without being asked. She began to set things in order. His scattered belongings found proper places. The layer of dust that had accumulated over months of bachelor living disappeared, and the smell of baking bread began to fill the small space. Cole watched her work from beneath the brim of his hat, pretending to mend tack or clean his rifles. He'd grown accustomed to solitude, to the way dust motes danced in the afternoon light, and the particular creak of the floorboards under his own weight. Now there was another presence, another rhythm of breathing in the night, another shadow moving across the walls. They spoke little those first days. What was there to say? She was running from something, he was hiding from something, and the desert kept their secrets equally. But silence, Cole learned, came in different varieties. There was his usual silence, comfortable and chosen. Then there was this new silence, weighted with unspoken questions and careful movements, as if they were both walking around broken glass. On the 6th day, the wind began to pick up, sending dust devils spinning across the canyon floor. Cole had seen the signs since morning, the way the horses grew restless, the peculiar yellow tinge to the eastern sky. A sandstorm was building, one of the fierce ones that could last for days and bury a man's mistakes along with his landmarks. "Storm coming," he told Clara as he secured the shutters. "Big one, from the looks of it. We'll need to bring everything inside that can blow away." She nodded and set to work without complaint, helping him haul in extra water and firewood. Her movements were steadier now, though he noticed she still tired quickly. They worked in companionable efficiency, and Cole found himself oddly grateful for the extra pair of hands. The storm hit just after nightfall, a howling wall of sand and fury that made the cabin walls groan. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in as many minutes, and even with the stove burning hot, cold seeped through every crack and crevice. Clara sat near the fire, needle in hand, mending a tear in Cole's work shirt. The lamplight caught the copper threads in her hair, and Cole noticed for the first time that her fingers, though bearing the calluses of hard work, moved with an elegant precision that spoke of gentler upbringings. "You weren't born to this life," he said, the words escaping before he could stop them. She looked up, a wry smile touching her lips. "No, I was raised in St. Louis. My father was a merchant. Dry goods, mostly. I learned to embroider, play the piano, speak a little French, all the accomplishments of a lady meant to make a good marriage." Her smile turned bitter. "And I did make what everyone called a good marriage. Samuel Whitmore had a prosperous ranch, good standing in the community. What more could a woman want?" Cole heard what she didn't say in the spaces between words. He'd seen the fading bruises, noticed how she still flinched when he moved too quickly. "How long were you married?" 5 years. She returned to her sewing, each stitch precise despite the trembling in her hands. 5 years of learning that respectability can hide a multitude of sins. Samuel was particular about things, how I dressed, how I spoke, who I could speak to, when I didn't meet his standards. She shrugged, a gesture meant to seem casual that fooled neither of them. The wind howled louder, and somewhere in the distance, Cole could hear the crack of a tree giving way to the storm's fury. He added another log to the stove, then surprised himself by speaking. "I knew a woman like that once, back in Colorado, before I came here, Margaret Sinclair." Even saying her name after 3 years felt like swallowing glass. She was married to a man who thought his fists were the best way to win an argument. She used to come to the stable where I worked, just to talk to someone who'd listen without judgment. Clara had stopped sewing, watching him with those green eyes that seemed to see too much. One night, her husband came looking for her, drunk, angry. There was a fight. Cole's hands clenched involuntarily. He hit her, and she fell, hit her head on an anvil. She died before the doctor could arrive. "But that wasn't your fault." Try telling that to a jury when the dead man is a respected citizen and you're just a stable hand. His voice was flat, emptied of emotion by repetition and time. "I spent 6 months in jail before a witness finally came forward, another woman her husband had been. particular with. By then, my reputation was ruined. Easier to leave than to fight the whispers. They sat in silence while the storm raged outside. Two people who'd been broken by the cruelty of others, taking shelter from more than just the weather. "Is that why you helped me?" Clara asked finally. "Because of her?" Cole considered the question. Maybe partly, but mostly because leaving someone to die in the desert seemed like letting them win. All those people who think they know the truth because it's easier than looking closer. Clara rose and moved to the window, peering through a crack in the shutters at the swirling darkness outside. They found Samuel at the base of Skeleton Ridge. His neck was broken. We'd been arguing. He'd accused me of smiling too much at the minister after church. Such a small thing. But She touched her ribs unconsciously. He followed me when I tried to walk away, grabbed my arm at the cliff's edge. The rocks were loose from the spring rains. When I pulled away, he lost his balance. And they blamed you. The bruises on my arm looked like I'd pushed him. And some of the women in town had seen my other bruises over the years, decided I was the kind of woman who drove a man to violence. When the minister admitted I'd sought his counsel about my marriage, she laughed, a sound like breaking pottery. Well, clearly I was a Jezebel who'd seduced a man of God and murdered my husband when he found out. The storm reached a new crescendo, and the cabin door rattled despite the heavy bar across it. They were trapped here together until it passed. Two people with ruined reputations and dangerous pasts, thrown together by chance and desperation. "I should start supper," Clara said, turning from the window. "Unless you—" "I'm no cook," Cole admitted. "Been living on beans and jerky so long, I'd probably forgotten what real food tastes like until you started using that stove." It was the closest thing to a compliment he'd offered, and Clara's face softened. She moved to the shelves where she'd organized his meager supplies, pulling down ingredients for what would become a simple but filling stew. Cole watched her work, noting the efficient grace of her movements, the way she hummed softly under her breath, a hymn he vaguely recognized from childhood. The storm had made the cabin feel smaller, more intimate. He was acutely aware of every sound she made, every shift of fabric, every breath. "I'll need to go to town when this blows over," he said abruptly. "Supplies are running low, and I'll need more food stores." Clara's hands stilled. "Of course, I understand. I'll be gone by then." "That's not what He stopped, frustrated by his inability to say what he meant. "You're not well enough to travel. And where would you go?" "I'll find somewhere. I've imposed enough." "You've imposed nothing." The words came out harsher than intended. "You've earned your keep and more. This place hasn't been this clean since I built it." She turned to face him fully, and something in her expression made his breath catch. "Is that all I am? A convenient housekeeper?" "No." The word hung between them like a challenge. "No, that's not all." The storm chose that moment to unleash its full fury, sending something heavy crashing against the cabin wall. They both startled, and Clara's hand went to her throat in an unconscious gesture of fear. "Just debris," Cole assured her, though he moved to check that the door and shutters were still secure. "We're safe here." Safe. The word felt strange in his mouth. He'd built this cabin for security, for isolation, for escape. But safety? That was something else entirely, something that might have more to do with the woman stirring stew on his stove than with stone walls and geographic remoteness. The night deepened, and the storm showed no signs of abating. They ate their meal in companionable quiet, the howling wind making conversation difficult. But words seemed less necessary now. Something had shifted between them with their shared confessions, a recognition of kindred damage that needed no elaboration. When Clara rose to clear the dishes, her hand brushed Cole's as she reached for his bowl. Both of them froze at the contact, such a small thing, but charged with possibility and fear in equal measure. She pulled away first, busying herself at the wash basin, but Cole could see the flush creeping up her neck. The storm would trap them here at least another day, perhaps two, and in that time, They would have to navigate this new awareness, this dangerous softening of carefully maintained boundaries. The desert had brought them together, but it was the storm that would force them to decide what that meant. The storm finally broke on the third day, leaving the desert transformed. Sand dunes had shifted, creating new landscapes where familiar paths once lay. Cole surveyed the damage from the cabin doorway. His water trough was half buried, and one of the fence posts had been torn free, but the structure itself had weathered the assault. "I need to check on the horses," he said, reaching for his hat. "They're sheltered in the canyon, but—" Of course. Clara didn't look up from her mending. She'd been distant since their conversation during the storm, careful to maintain a proper distance between them. "I'll prepare breakfast." Cole lingered at the door, wanting to say something to break through the new awkwardness between them, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he stepped out into the clean-washed morning, where the sun was already beginning to bake the moisture from the sand. The horses were unharmed but skittish, and it took him longer than usual to calm them and ensure they had adequate water. By the time he returned to the cabin, the sun was high and his shirt was soaked with sweat. He found Clara standing at the table, her face pale as parchment, clutching a piece of paper. "What is it?" He crossed to her in 3 strides, his hand moving instinctively to the gun at his hip. "Someone was here." "While you were gone," her voice was steady, but he could see the tremor in her hands. "They left this—" Cole took the paper, a wanted poster, crudely printed. Clara's name was there, along with a description and a reward of $50 for information leading to her capture for questioning in the death of Samuel Whitmore. How did they know? "The storm," Clara said quietly. "Someone must have sought shelter nearby, seen the cabin, seen me through the window. Perhaps—" Cole crumpled the poster in his fist. "They didn't try to take you. No, just left a warning, maybe, or they've gone for help." She moved to the window, peering out at the empty desert. "I should leave now, before—" "No." The word came out more forcefully than he'd intended, and Clara turned to face him, surprise flickering across her features. "I won't run anymore." Cole continued, moderating his tone. "And neither should you. Not from lies and gossip." This isn't your fight." "Isn't it?" He laughed, a harsh sound. "A woman blamed for a man's death, run out of town by people who'd rather believe the worst than look at the truth? Seems familiar enough to me." Clara studied him for a long moment, then asked the question he'd seen forming in her eyes for days. "Do you ever regret it? Helping me?" "No." The answer came without hesitation. "Whatever happens, no." Something shifted in her expression, a softening, a vulnerability she'd kept carefully hidden. She took a step toward him, then another, until she stood close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her green eyes, could smell the lavender soap she'd found in his supplies. "Cole." His name on her lips was barely a whisper. "I'm frightened." "I know." He lifted his hand, hesitated, then gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. "But you're not alone. Not anymore." The moment stretched between them, fragile as spun glass. Then Clara lifted her own hand to cover his where it rested against her cheek. The simple touch sent a shock through him, as if lightning had struck nearby. "This is dangerous," she whispered, but she didn't pull away. "Everything's dangerous out here." His thumb traced the line of her cheekbone, marveling at the softness. "Question is whether it's worth the risk." Instead of answering with words, Clara rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, a question more than a statement. Then Cole's arms came around her, pulling her against him, and tentative became certain. Question became answer. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Clara's cheeks were flushed, and Cole felt as unsteady as a green-broke colt. Clara began, then stopped, pressing her fingers to her lips as if to hold the sensation there. "Don't," Cole said softly. "Don't apologize or explain or run. Just let it be." She nodded, but he could see the war in her eyes, desire battling with fear, hope wrestling with hard-learned caution. He understood. He felt it too. This terrifying possibility of something beyond mere survival. A sound from outside made them both freeze. Horses approaching. Several of them. Cole moved swiftly to the window, peering through the gap in the shutters. 3 riders, he reported tersely. Coming from the direction of town. Clara's face drained of color, but she lifted her chin with a courage that made his heart twist. I won't hide. No one's asking you to. Cole checked his rifle, then his pistol. But I won't let them take you either. Not without cause. The riders drew closer, and Cole recognized the lead man, Sheriff Josiah Briggs from Redemption Creek, a fair man by most accounts, though Cole had little trust in the law these days. Cole Danner, the sheriff called out as they reined in outside the cabin. I know you're in there. Like to have a word. Cole opened the door but didn't step outside, keeping his rifle visible but not directly threatening. Sheriff, long ride from town. Had reports of a woman matching a certain description in these parts. Briggs's weathered face was unreadable. Mind if we come in? Rather not. Cole's stance didn't waver. Say what you came to say. The sheriff sighed, removing his hat to wipe his brow. Look, Danner, I know you keep to yourself, and I respect that. But if you're harboring Clara Whitmore, I need to know. There are questions need answering about her husband's death. Since when is falling off a cliff a crime? Since folks started saying she pushed him. One of the deputies, a young man with mean eyes, spoke up. Woman's got a reputation. Enough, Willis. The sheriff cut him off. I'm not here on gossip, but I do need to speak with Mrs. Whitmore if she's here. Clara appeared at Cole's shoulder before he could respond. I'm here, Sheriff Briggs. The lawman's eyes widened slightly at her appearance. Perhaps he'd expected someone harder, more obviously guilty. Instead, he saw a woman worn down by hardship but holding herself with quiet dignity. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me. There's an inquest. She's not going anywhere. Cole's voice was flat, final. Not until she's healed proper. Desert nearly killed her. I'm not asking, Danner, and I'm not offering. Cole shifted slightly, a subtle reminder that he was armed and on his own property. The lady sought shelter, and I provided it. Last I checked, that wasn't a crime. The tension stretched taut as a bowstring. The deputies' hands drifted toward their weapons, but Briggs held up a hand to still them. I could come back with more men, the sheriff said quietly. Make this ugly. You could. Cole met his gaze steadily. But you won't, because you're a fair man, and you know something doesn't smell right about this. $50 reward for a woman whose only crime is surviving? Who's putting up that money? Sheriff. Briggs' jaw tightened, and Cole knew he'd hit a nerve. That's not your concern. It is if they're using you to do their dirty work. Cole felt Clara's hand touch his arm, a gentle warning, but he continued. Ask yourself why they want her so bad. What are they afraid she might say? The sheriff was quiet for a long moment, studying them both. Then he settled his hat back on his head with a decisive motion. I'll be back in a week, he said finally. Mrs. Whitmore, I expect you to be here and willing to answer questions. If you run, I'll have no choice but to hunt you down. But, he paused, choosing his words carefully, I'll also be doing some asking of my own. There are things about Samuel Whitmore's business dealings that bear looking into. Sheriff, the mean-eyed deputy protested. We're leaving. Willis. Briggs turned his horse. 1 week, Danner. Don't make me regret this. They watched the riders disappear into the heat shimmer, dust settling in their wake. Only then did Clara sag against the doorframe, the strength going out of her. A week, she murmured. What can change in a week? Cole turned to her, seeing the fear she'd kept hidden during the confrontation. Without thinking, he pulled her into his arms, holding her as tremors ran through her body. Everything, he said into her hair. Everything can change, and standing there in the doorway of his cabin, holding this woman who'd upended his carefully ordered world. Cole knew he'd already crossed a line he couldn't uncross. The question now was how far beyond that line he was willing to go. The week passed with agonizing swiftness. Each sunrise brought them closer to the sheriff's return, and with it, the weight of uncertainty pressed heavier upon the small cabin. Clara threw herself into work, cooking, cleaning, mending, anything to keep her hands busy and her mind from dwelling on what was to come. Cole watched her with growing concern. Dark circles had appeared beneath her eyes, and she startled at every sound from outside. He'd tried to speak with her about the sheriff's visit, about making plans, but she'd turned away each time, building walls between them that hadn't existed since their kiss. On the 5th night, he found her sitting outside beneath the stars, wrapped in a blanket despite the warm evening. The desert stretched endlessly before them, painted silver by moonlight. Can't sleep. He settled beside her on the rough wooden bench he'd built years ago. Samuel used to say, "I think too much." Her voice was distant, hollow, that it was unbecoming in a woman. He tried to discourage the habit. Cole's hands clenched, but he kept his voice even. "Thinking's what keeps us alive out here." "Is it?" She turned to him, and the moonlight revealed tears on her cheeks. "Because right now, all I can think about is how I've ruined your life. They know I'm here now. Even if the sheriff decides I'm innocent, the town won't forget. They'll remember you harbored the widow witch. Let them remember." The fierce protectiveness in his own voice surprised him. "I've lived with their whispers before." "But you shouldn't have to." Her voice broke. "Cole, I should leave. Tonight. Before—" "No." He caught her hand as she started to rise. "Clara, look at me." She did, reluctantly, and he saw all her fear and guilt laid bare in her eyes. "You asked me once if I regretted helping you," he said slowly. "The truth is, these past weeks have been the first time in 3 years I've felt alive. Not just existing, but living. You did that. Cole, I'm not finished." He kept hold of her hand, feeling her pulse flutter beneath his fingers. "I won't pretend I'm not scared. But I'm more scared of going back to that emptiness, of letting them win again." Clara's free hand came up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "You beautiful, foolish man," she whispered. "Don't you see? I can't bear being the reason you suffer. Not when you've shown me more kindness than—" He silenced her with a kiss, pouring all the words he couldn't say into the contact. When they parted, both were breathless. "We face whatever comes together," he said firmly. "That's not up for debate." She searched his eyes for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Together." Then they sat in silence, hands entwined, watching the stars wheel overhead, the desert night wrapped around them like a cocoon, temporarily holding the world at bay. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Cole was checking the horses when he heard Clara call his name, urgency threading through her voice. He found her at the door, facing 2 women on horseback, one elderly with steel-gray hair, the other younger, perhaps 30, with a kind face marred by a fading bruise on her cheekbone. "Mrs. Patterson?" Clara's voice held disbelief. "Mrs. Mills, what are you doing here?" The older woman, Mrs. Patterson, dismounted with surprising agility. "We came to warn you, child. And to tell the truth, if anyone will listen." Cole stepped protectively beside Clara. "What truth?" "Mrs.?" Mills climbed down more carefully, favoring her left side. "About Samuel Whitmore, about what kind of man he really was." "You should come inside," Clara said, though Cole could hear the tremor in her voice. "The sun—" "We can't stay long." "Mrs.?" Patterson interrupted. "But you need to know. There's more at stake than just Samuel's death. His business partner, Harrison Fleming, has been spreading gold around town like seed corn. He's the one funding the reward for your capture." "Fleming?" Cole knew the name, a merchant who'd grown wealthy through means that didn't bear close examination. "What's his interest?" Samuel had records. "Mrs." Mills spoke up, wincing as she shifted her weight. Proof that Fleming had been cheating the Apache on the reservation contracts, selling spoiled grain and keeping the difference. Samuel was going to expose him. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. The ledgers, Samuel kept them locked in his study. He was paranoid about them. Wouldn't even let me dust in there. Fleming tore the house apart after you fled. Mrs. Patterson confirmed. But he didn't find them. We think Samuel hid them somewhere else, and Fleming thinks you know where. But I don't. Clara's voice rose in frustration. Samuel never told me anything about his business. Mrs. Mills stepped forward, taking Clara's hands in hers. We know, dear, but Fleming can't afford to believe that. As long as you're alive, you're a threat to him. Cole's mind was racing, pieces falling into place. So he's using the law to do his killing for him, get her hanged for murder. Problem solved. Except Sheriff Briggs is too honest for his liking. Mrs. Patterson said with grim satisfaction. The sheriff's been asking questions around town, found out about Samuel's temper, about the doctor's visits that were never officially recorded. She looked meaningfully at Mrs. Mills's bruised face. You told him? Clara's eyes widened. But that means that people will know what my husband is really like? Mrs. Mills's laugh was bitter. Samuel wasn't the only man in town who used his fists to make a point. Maybe it's time that changed. Cole felt a surge of respect for these women, risking their own reputations to speak truth. What do you need from us? Stay alive, Mrs. Patterson said bluntly. The sheriff will be here tomorrow with questions. Answer them honestly. We've given him enough to doubt Fleming's version of events, but he'll need to hear from you directly. There's something else. Mrs. Mills added hesitantly. I was there that day, at Skeleton Ridge. I'd gone to gather herbs. My husband doesn't know. I saw Samuel follow you, saw him grab you, saw him fall when the rocks gave way. Clara swayed, and Cole steadied her with an arm around her waist. You saw? But why didn't you come forward immediately? Mrs. Mills's face crumpled. Because I was a coward. Because I knew what would happen if I admitted to being there alone. But I can't stay silent anymore. Not when I know what it's like to live in fear of a man's fists. The sheriff has her statement now, Mrs. Patterson said, along with testimonies from 3 other women about Samuel's violence. It won't be easy. Fleming has influence. But it's a start. They left soon after, promising to send word of any developments. Clara stood in the doorway long after their dust had settled, tears streaming down her face. All this time, she whispered, I thought I was alone, that no one would believe me. Cole turned her gently to face him. You're not alone. You never will be again, if I have anything to say about it. She looked up at him with such raw hope that it took his breath away. Do you mean that? Every word. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away her tears. Whatever tomorrow brings, we face it together. That night, for the first time since the sheriff's visit, Clara came to him, not seeking passion, though that simmered between them always, but seeking comfort, seeking the solid reassurance of his presence. They lay together fully clothed on his narrow bed, her head on his chest, listening to each other breathe. Tell me about after, she said softly. After all this is over. What then? Cole stroked her hair, considering, depends on what you want. We could stay here, make a proper home of this place. Or we could leave, head further west where no one knows either of our names. And if they arrest me tomorrow, if the testimony isn't enough, then I'll tear that jail apart with my bare hands to get you out. The violence in his voice should have frightened her, but instead she pressed closer. I believe you would. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I think I'm falling in love with you. Cole Danner? No, I know I am. Is that foolish? He tightened his arms around her, pressing his lips to her hair. If it is, then we're both fools, because I passed falling a while back. I'm all the way at the bottom of that particular cliff. She laughed, a sound like water in the desert, precious and life-giving. Only you would make falling in love sound like a catastrophe. Isn't it? But he was smiling now, too. My whole life turned upside down by a half-dead woman in a torn dress. Seems catastrophic to me. She lifted her head to look at him, and what he saw in her eyes made his heart stutter. The best kind of catastrophe, then? The very best. He agreed, and pulled her up for a kiss that was promise and prayer and declaration all at once. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring. But tonight, in this small cabin at the edge of nowhere, two people who'd been broken by the world had found in each other the possibility of being whole again. And that, Cole thought as Clara settled back against his chest, was worth any risk. The stars watched through the window as they held each other, no longer alone in the vast and unforgiving desert. Whatever judgment awaited them, they would meet it as they were now, united, unafraid, and unexpectedly, impossibly, in love. Sheriff Briggs arrived at dawn, but not as they expected. Instead of a posse, he came with only one deputy, an older man named Thompson who had kind eyes and a steady demeanor. More surprising still was the woman who rode with them, Mrs. Mills, her chin high despite the bruise that had darkened to purple since her last visit. Mrs. Whitmore. The sheriff dismounted, his manner formal but not hostile. "I've been doing considerable investigating since we last spoke. Mrs. Mills here has provided testimony, along with several other citizens, but I need to hear your account directly." Clara stepped forward, Cole a protective shadow at her shoulder. "I'll tell you everything. Sheriff, the truth, though it may not be what Mr. Fleming wants you to hear." Briggs' weathered face showed a flicker of satisfaction. "Fleming's want stopped concerning me when I discovered he'd been paying witnesses. Now, shall we sit? This might take some time." They arranged themselves around Cole's rough table, Mrs. Mills sitting beside Clara in silent support. The sheriff produced a notebook, his manner becoming that of a careful investigator rather than an accuser. Clara told her story without embellishment. The years of marriage, the escalating violence, that final day on Skeleton Ridge. Her voice remained steady, though Cole could see the effort it cost her. When she described Samuel's hands on her arms, his rage at her supposed transgression, Cole had to force himself to remain still. "He followed me when I tried to leave," Clara continued. "Grabbed me at the cliff's edge. The recent rains had loosened the rocks. When I pulled away..." She paused, meeting the sheriff's eyes directly. "I wanted to get free. I didn't want him to fall. Despite everything, I didn't want him dead." "Mrs. Mills." Briggs turned to the other woman. "You've sworn you witnessed this event. Tell me what you saw." Mrs. Mills's account matched Clara's in every particular. She'd been gathering healing herbs, a small freedom she stole when her own husband was away. She'd seen Samuel's pursuit, his aggressive manner, the struggle at the cliff's edge. "The rocks gave way under his feet," she said firmly. Mrs. Whitmore tried to grab him. Actually, reached out to catch his hand, but it happened too fast. The sheriff made notes, then looked up. "Why didn't you come forward immediately, Mrs.?" Mills touched her bruised face unconsciously. "Because I would have had to explain why I was there alone. Because my husband shares certain traits with the late Mr. Whitmore. I was a coward, Sheriff, but I won't be one anymore." "I see." Briggs's voice held unexpected gentleness. He turned back to Clara. "There's the matter of the ledgers Fleming claims are missing. Do you know anything about them?" Clara shook her head. "Samuel was secretive about his business. He had a study he kept locked. I wasn't even allowed to clean in there." "Interesting." The sheriff made another note. "Because when we searched the house, with proper authorization this time, we found a hidden compartment in his desk, empty but recently disturbed. And Fleming seemed mighty upset about that." Cole spoke for the first time. "You think Fleming already has them?" "I think Fleming destroyed evidence of his own wrongdoing and is trying to ensure the one person who might know about it can't testify." Briggs closed his notebook. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm satisfied that your husband's death was accidental. More than that, I'm opening an investigation into Harrison Fleming's business practices and his attempts to pervert justice." Clara sagged with relief, and Cole placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, but the sheriff wasn't finished. "However," Briggs continued, Fleming has resources and influence. He's also grown desperate, which makes him dangerous. I can't guarantee your safety if you return to town." "She's not returning to town." Cole's statement was flat. Final. "She stays here." "That's not your decision," Clara began. But Cole cut her off. "You're right. It's ours." He looked at her intently. "Stay. Not because you have to, but because you want to. Because this is home now." The sheriff cleared his throat. "There's another option. My cousin runs a boarding house in California. You could start fresh there. Mrs. Whitmore. New name, new life, where Fleming's reach doesn't extend." Clara was quiet for a long moment, looking between Cole and the sheriff. When she spoke, her voice was steady and sure. "Thank you, Sheriff, but I've done enough running. My place is here." "Mrs." Mills smiled for the first time, reaching over to squeeze Clara's hand. "Good for you, dear." As the sheriff prepared to leave, he pulled Cole aside. "Fleming won't take this quietly. Watch your back. Always do." Cole glanced at Clara, who was embracing Mrs. Mills in farewell. "Sheriff, thank you for looking deeper, for believing her." Briggs settled his hat on his head. "Sometimes the truth is worth digging for. Danner, you two take care of each other." After they left, Clara stood in the doorway, watching the dust settle. "It's not over, is it? Fleming won't just give up." "No," Cole agreed, moving to stand behind her. "But you heard the sheriff. He's investigating now. Fleming's days of running roughshod over people are numbered." She leaned back against him, and he wrapped his arms around her waist. "I meant what I said about staying. But Cole, I need to know, is this real? Or are we just two damaged people clinging to each other?" He turned her to face him, seeing all her vulnerability and hope laid bare. "You want to know if it's real? I'll tell you what's real. The way my heart stops every time you smile. The way this empty cabin became a home the moment you entered it. The way I'd face down Fleming and all his hired guns before I'd let anyone hurt you again. Cole, I'm not done." He cradled her face in his hands. "Before you came, I was just existing, going through the motions, day after day, telling myself that was enough. You changed that. You made me want more than just survival. You made me want a life worth living." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You saved me, in every way a person can be saved. We saved each other." He brushed away her tears with his thumbs. "Question is, what do we do now?" A smile broke through her tears like sunshine through storm clouds. "Now? Now we build a life. Together, if you'll have me." "If I'll have you?" He laughed, the sound rich with joy and disbelief. "Clara Whitmore, I'd marry you today if there was a preacher within 50 miles. Is that a proposal?" Her eyes sparkled with something that looked like mischief. "It's a promise." He sealed it with a kiss that was fierce and tender and full of all their tomorrows. When they broke apart, Clara's expression had turned thoughtful. "We'll need to make improvements to the cabin. It's rather small for two people. I've got lumber stored in the canyon. Been meaning to add on. And a proper garden. I saw a spot near the well that would be perfect. Whatever you want." He couldn't stop touching her. Her face, her hair, her hands, as if reassuring himself she was real and staying. "What I want," she said softly, "is a life with you, here in this desert that brought us together, away from the ugliness and judgment, just us and the stars and the silence." "The silence isn't so silent anymore," he teased. "You hum when you cook, sing when you think I'm not listening. Do you mind?" "No." He pulled her close again. "I love it. I love—" He stopped, the words catching in his throat. "Say it," she whispered. "Please." "I love you, Clara. With everything I am and everything I have, I love you too. My unlikely savior, my desert cowboy, my home." They stood there in the doorway of their cabin, holding each other as the morning sun climbed higher. The desert stretched endlessly around them, harsh and beautiful and theirs. Whatever challenges came, and Cole knew they would come, they would face them together. In the distance, a hawk cried out, wheeling high on the thermals. The desert was waking to another day, indifferent to human dramas, but somehow blessed by them too. And in a small stone cabin built by a man seeking solitude, two people who had found each other against all odds began the work of building a life together. It wouldn't be easy. Fleming was still out there, no doubt plotting his next move. The town's gossips would have their say. The desert itself would test them with its harsh demands. But standing there with Clara in his arms, Cole found he wasn't afraid anymore. Love, he was learning, was its own kind of courage. "Come inside," Clara said finally, tugging him back into their home. "I'll make breakfast, and we can start planning that addition. I'm thinking a room with more windows. This desert light is too beautiful to shut out." "Anything you want," he repeated, meaning it with every fiber of his being. As he followed her inside, Cole thought about the twisting path that had brought them here. Two people running from pain, finding each other in the emptiness, choosing love over fear. It shouldn't have worked. By all rights, they should have been destroyed by their pasts, ground down by circumstances, lost to the desert's indifference. Instead, they'd found salvation in each other's arms. And that, Cole thought as he watched Clara move about their kitchen with easy grace, was the kind of miracle worth believing in. The news spread through the territory like wildfire. Harrison Fleming had been arrested for fraud and attempted bribery. But his reach was long, and even from a jail cell, a desperate man with money could buy revenge. Cole knew this, had been preparing for it, which was why he wasn't entirely surprised when riders appeared on the horizon 3 weeks after the sheriff's visit. "Get inside," he told Clara tersely, checking the load on his Winchester. "Bar the door. I'm not leaving you. Clara, please." He caught her hand, squeezing briefly. "I need to know you're safe so I can focus on what's coming." She searched his face, then nodded, disappearing into the cabin. Cole heard the heavy bar drop into place and allowed himself a moment of relief before turning to face whatever Fleming had sent his way. There were 4 of them, hired guns by the look of them. With hard faces and well-used weapons, they stopped just outside rifle range. Their leader, a man with cold gray eyes and a scar bisecting his left cheek, riding slightly forward. "Cole Danner," the scarred man called out. "That's right. State your business or move on. Name's Harlan Frost. Mr. Fleming sends his regards." Frost's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Seems you've been harboring something that belongs to him. Nothing here belongs to Fleming except maybe a bullet if you don't turn around." Frost laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Brave words for one man against 4. But we're not here for you. Danner, just the woman. Send her out, and we ride away. No one needs to die today. The only way you're getting to her is through me." Cole's voice was steady as granite. "And I guarantee you'll pay a price you won't like." "Figured you'd say that." Frost shifted in his saddle, and Cole caught the subtle movement of his hand toward his gun. "Fleming said you were sweet on the widow. Shame to die for a woman who ain't even yours." "That's where you're wrong." The cabin door opened behind him, and Cole's heart sank as Clara stepped out, her chin high, but his protest died when he saw what she carried. His spare rifle, held with surprising competence. "I'm exactly where I belong," Clara said clearly. "And if you want me, you'll have to go through both of us." Frost's eyes narrowed, calculating odds that had just shifted. "Mrs. Whitmore, you've caused Mr. Fleming considerable trouble." "Good." Her voice could have cut glass. "I hope he rots in that cell thinking about all the people he's hurt. He won't be there long. Man like him has friends, lawyers. But you..." Frost's smile widened. "You won't be around to testify against him." The moment stretched taut, desert wind whistling between them. Cole could feel the weight of impending violence, that peculiar stillness that came before gunfire. His finger rested on the trigger. "Ready." It was Frost who moved first, his hand blurring toward his holster. Cole's rifle spoke before the man's gun cleared leather, the shot taking Frost in the shoulder and spinning him from his horse. The other three went for their weapons, but Clara's rifle cracked, sending one man's hat flying and making him duck. "Inside!" Cole roared, firing again as bullets whined past them. Clara retreated to the doorway but kept shooting, providing cover as Cole backed toward the cabin. They made it inside just as wood splintered from the door frame. Cole slammed the door and dropped the bar, then moved to the window. The three remaining gunmen had taken cover behind a cluster of rocks, Frost crawling to join them, his arm hanging useless. "You hit?" Cole asked Clara, who was reloading with steady hands. "No? You? I'm fine." He was, physically, but the rage burning in him at these men threatening Clara made his hands shake slightly. "You did good out there. You taught me well." She moved to the other window, rifle ready. "How long before they rush us?" "They'll wait for dark, most likely. Try to smoke us out, or..." His words were cut off by breaking glass as something flew through the window. A bottle with a flaming rag stuffed in its neck hit the floor, spreading liquid fire across the boards. Clara reacted instantly, grabbing the water bucket and dousing the flames before they could spread. But more bottles followed, and Cole knew with sinking certainty that they couldn't defend against fire and bullets both. "We need to get out," he said urgently. "They'll burn us out or shoot us when we run from the flames." "The root cellar," Clara said suddenly. "The one you showed me behind the cabin. Could we..." "Maybe." It was their only chance. "Stay low. Move fast. I'll cover you." They waited for a lull in the gunfire. Then Cole flung the back door open, firing rapidly at the rocks to keep their attackers' heads down. Clara sprinted for the cellar entrance, diving inside just as bullets sparked off the rocks beside her. Cole followed, backing toward the cellar while maintaining covering fire. A lucky shot caught one of the gunmen in the leg, dropping him with a scream. Then Cole was tumbling into the cellar beside Clara, pulling the heavy door shut above them. The space was cramped and dark, meant for storing preserves and root vegetables, not hiding from killers. They could hear boots on the ground above, muffled voices. "Check inside," Frost's voice, tight with pain and anger. They can't have gone far. The cellar door was hidden beneath a layer of dirt and scrub, but it wouldn't stand close inspection. Cole held Clara close, feeling her heart race against his chest. "If they find us," she whispered. "They won't." He pressed his lips to her hair. "And if they do, we'll face it together, like we promised." Minutes crawled by like hours. They heard the gunmen searching the cabin, cursing when they found it empty. Frost's voice grew more distant as they expanded their search. "The horses are still here," one man called out. "They're hiding somewhere close. Find them," Frost snarled. "Tear this place apart if you have to." Cole checked his ammunition. Not much left. Enough for a final stand. Maybe, but not enough to win against three armed men in the open. He met Clara's eyes in the dim light filtering through the door cracks, saw his own determination reflected there. Then, just when discovery seemed inevitable, new sounds reached them. Horses approaching fast, voices shouting. Gunfire erupted again, but different this time. Not aimed at the cabin. "Sheriff's posse," someone yelled. "Drop your weapons." The firefight was brief but intense. Cole and Clara remained hidden, listening to the chaos above. When silence finally fell, they heard Sheriff Briggs' familiar voice. "Danner, Mrs. Whitmore, you folks all right?" Cole pushed open the cellar door cautiously, squinting in the sudden brightness. Sheriff Briggs stood over Frost, who lay face down in the dirt, hands being bound behind his back. Deputy Thompson and several other men had the remaining gunmen under guard. "Sheriff?" Cole helped Clara up from the cellar. "Your timing is impeccable. Mrs. Mills saw these men heading this way. Rode hard to town to fetch us." Briggs surveyed the bullet-riddled cabin and scorched walls. "Looks like we nearly didn't make it in time." "Nearly doesn't count," Clara said firmly. "We're alive. That's what matters." Frost lifted his head from the dirt, hatred burning in his eyes. "Fleming's got more money than you think. Sheriff, this ain't over. It is for you." Briggs hauled him to his feet. "Attempted murder, arson, conspiracy. You'll be seeing the inside of Yuma Prison. Frost. As for Fleming, He's been transferred to federal custody. Seems the government takes a dim view of stealing from Apache reservations. As the posse prepared to leave with their prisoners, Mrs. Mills appeared, having stayed back during the fighting. She embraced Clara tightly. "I'm so glad you're safe. When I saw those men, I knew they meant trouble." "You saved our lives," Clara said, tears threatening. "Again, just returning the favor." Mrs. Mills smiled. "You gave me courage to speak up. Now maybe other women will find theirs too." After everyone left, Cole and Clara stood surveying the damage to their home. Bullet holes pocked the walls, scorch marks blackened the floor, and one window was completely shattered. "I'm sorry," Clara said quietly. "This is because of me." "Your home." "Our home," Cole corrected. "And it can be repaired. What can't be replaced is you." He pulled her against him, needing the solid reassurance of her presence. "When you came out with that rifle, Clara, you could have been killed. So could you." She looked up at him fiercely. "Did you really think I'd hide while you faced them alone? We're partners, Cole, in everything." He kissed her then, pouring all his fear and relief and love into the contact. When they parted, both were breathless. "Partners," he agreed. "Though maybe next time we can be partners without people shooting at us." She laughed, the sound bright in the desert air. "Where's the fun in that?" They spent the rest of the day cleaning up what they could, boarding over the worst damage. As the sun set, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson, they sat on the bench outside, shoulders touching. "It's really over now, isn't it?" Clara asked. "Fleming's gone, his men captured. We're free. Free to build that life we talked about." Cole took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "Starting with fixing this place up properly, maybe adding that room with extra windows you wanted. And a garden. Don't forget the garden." "Never!" He brought their joined hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "Anything else you want? Soon to be Mrs. Danner?" She turned to him, eyes sparkling. "Just you. Everything else is details." As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they sat in comfortable silence. Two souls who had found each other in the vast emptiness and chosen to make it home. The desert stretched endlessly around them, beautiful and harsh and theirs, and for the first time in years, neither of them looked back at what they'd lost. There was too much ahead to look forward to. 2 months passed in relative peace. The cabin bore new timber where bullets had torn through. Fresh glass gleamed in the windows, and Clara's garden had begun to take root near the well. Life had settled into a rhythm of simple pleasures, morning coffee shared in comfortable silence, evenings spent planning improvements to their home, nights wrapped in each other's arms while coyotes sang to the moon. But peace in the territory was always temporary, and Cole knew it was only a matter of time before the past intruded again. He just hadn't expected it to arrive in the form of Judge William Thornton, riding up to their homestead with only a court clerk for company. "Mr. Danner, Mrs. Whitmore." The judge, a dignified man with silver temples and keen eyes, dismounted carefully. "I apologize for the unexpected visit, but there are matters requiring your attention." Clara emerged from the cabin, flour still dusting her hands from the bread she'd been making. "Judge Thornton, has something happened?" In a manner of speaking, the judge accepted Cole's offer of water gratefully. "Harrison Fleming has been convicted on all charges. He'll spend the next 20 years breaking rocks. However, his lawyers have raised questions about Samuel Whitmore's estate." Cole felt Clara tense beside him. "What questions?" "As Samuel's widow, you're entitled to his property and assets. Fleming's lawyers are contesting this, claiming the circumstances of Samuel's death disqualify you from inheritance." The judge's expression was sympathetic but firm. "You'll need to appear before the territorial court to defend your claim." "I don't want his money," Clara said quickly. "Or his property. I want nothing from that life." "Understandable. But consider this. Samuel's estate includes the contracts for supplying the Apache reservation. In the right hands, Those contracts could ensure fair dealing and proper goods for people who've suffered enough already. Cole saw the conflict in Clara's eyes. She'd fled that life, wanted no reminders of it. But the judge was right. In Fleming's absence, someone needed to ensure the Apache weren't cheated again. When? Cole asked. 3 days hence. The hearing is in Prescott. The judge paused. Mrs. Whitmore, I should warn you, Fleming's lawyers will attempt to paint you in the worst possible light. They'll drag up every rumor, every whisper. It won't be pleasant. Nothing about my marriage was pleasant. Judge, I survived that. I can survive this. After the judge left, Clara stood staring at the distant mountains, her shoulders rigid with tension. Cole waited, knowing she needed time to process this unwelcome intrusion of her past. I thought it was over, she said finally. Foolish of me. Not foolish, hopeful. He moved behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. You don't have to do this. Let them have the estate. And let them continue cheating the Apache? Samuel was many things, but he kept honest books with the reservation. It was the one decent thing about him. She leaned back against Cole's chest. Will you come with me? Try to stop me. 3 days later, they rode into Prescott, a bustling town that seemed overwhelmingly crowded after months in the desert. Clara wore her best dress, one they'd bought from a traveling merchant, and held her head high despite the stares and whispers that followed their progress to the courthouse. The courtroom was packed. News of the hearing had spread, drawing curious townspeople eager for scandal. Cole recognized several faces from Redemption Creek, including Mrs. Mills and Mrs. Patterson, who'd come to support Clara, Fleming's lawyer. A sharp-featured man named Aldrich wasted no time in attacking Clara's character. Mrs. Whitmore, he began, his tone dripping false sympathy. Is it true you were seen in private consultation with Reverend Mills on multiple occasions before your husband's death? I sought spiritual guidance about my marriage. There was nothing improper, so you say, yet your husband suspected otherwise. Did he not? Isn't that why he followed you that day to Skeleton Ridge? Clara's hands clenched in her lap, but her voice remained steady. My husband suspected many things. Mr. Aldrich. He once accused me of signaling lovers with the way I hung laundry. Samuel's suspicions were symptoms of his own troubled mind, not reality. Yet he's dead, and you're here with another man. Aldrich gestured toward Cole. How convenient. Cole started to rise, anger burning in his chest, but Clara's hand on his arm stopped him. She faced the lawyer with quiet dignity. Mr. Danner saved my life when I was dying in the desert after being driven from my home by people who preferred comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths. If finding love after surviving years of torment is convenient, Mr. Aldrich, then I'm guilty of convenience. Judge Thornton intervened. Mr. Aldrich, please confine yourself to relevant questions about the estate. But the damage was done. Aldrich had painted the picture he wanted. A calculating woman who disposed of one husband and quickly taken up with another. The whispers in the gallery grew louder. Then Mrs. Mills stood up in the gallery. May I speak, Your Honor? The judge considered. This is highly irregular. Please, Your Honor, there are things that need saying. At the judge's nod, Mrs. Mills moved forward, her bruised face visible to all. I knew Samuel Whitmore. My husband did business with him. I also know what kind of man he was behind closed doors, because my husband is the same kind. She touched her bruised cheek. The kind who believes his fists give him the right to rule his household through fear. Mrs. Mills, Aldrich interrupted. Your personal situation has no bearing, doesn't it? She turned to face the gallery. How many of you knew Samuel Whitmore had broken his wife's ribs twice? How many knew about the doctor's visits in the night, the bruises hidden beneath long sleeves even in summer heat? You all knew. You just chose to look away. The courtroom had gone silent. Mrs. Mills continued, her voice gaining strength. Clara Whitmore survived 5 years of marriage to a man who saw her as property. She never fought back, never gave him cause beyond existing. And when she finally found happiness with a decent man, you want to punish her for it? Haven't we punished her enough? One by one, other women began to stand. Mrs. Patterson, the doctor's wife, the seamstress, even the banker's daughter. Silent testimony to shared understanding, shared pain, shared courage. Judge Thornton cleared his throat. Mr. Aldrich, do you have any actual evidence that Mrs. Whitmore was responsible for her husband's death? The circumstances have been thoroughly investigated by Sheriff Briggs, who found no evidence of foul play. Do you have anything else? Aldrich's face flushed. The moral implications are not for this court to decide. Mrs. Whitmore is the legal widow of Samuel Whitmore, unless you can prove otherwise. She's entitled to his estate. The judge's gavel came down decisively. The estate of Samuel Whitmore is awarded to his widow, Clara Whitmore, to dispose of as she sees fit. The courtroom erupted in mixed reactions, applause from some, angry mutters from others. Clara sat very still, as if afraid to move and break the moment. Outside the courthouse, she finally allowed herself to breathe. It's done. It's done, Cole agreed, pulling her close despite the watching crowd. What will you do with the estate? Clara was quiet for a moment, then smiled. I'm going to sell the house and land. Use the money to ensure the Apache contracts are handled fairly. Set up a fund to help women who need to escape situations like mine. And then, she looked up at him. Then I'm going home, to our cabin, to our life. Mrs. Whitmore. A young woman approached hesitantly. I'm sorry to intrude. What you did in there, standing up to them. It gives the rest of us hope. Clara took the woman's hands gently. We all have more strength than we know. Sometimes it just takes finding it. As they prepared to leave town the next morning, Sheriff Briggs found them at the hotel. Thought you should know. Fleming tried to hire men from his cell to come after you again. We caught them before they could leave town. Will it never end? Clara asked wearily. It has ended, Briggs assured her. Fleming's being transferred to a federal prison back east. He won't be able to reach you from there. You're free. Mrs. Whitmore, truly free. The ride home was quiet, both of them processing the events of the past days. As they crested the final ridge and saw their cabin nestled in the canyon below, Clara reined in her horse. Cole, that question you asked before, about making me Mrs. Danner? His heart skipped. Yes. I'm ready to answer now. Yes, 1,000 times yes. He dismounted and lifted her from her saddle, spinning her around as she laughed. When? As soon as we can find a preacher. I want our life to begin properly. No more shadows from the past. No more shadows, he agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss that left them both breathless. As they rode down to their cabin, the setting sun painted the desert in shades of gold and rose. The garden Clara had planted was thriving, green shoots pushing up through the sandy soil. The cabin itself looked welcoming, solid, permanent, a proper home rather than a mere shelter. We should add that room soon, Clara mused. Before winter, and maybe a larger corral for the horses. Already planning changes? Future Mrs. Danner? Always. She smiled at him, radiant with happiness. That's what you do when you're building a life. You plan, you dream, you work to make it real. That night, as they sat outside watching the stars emerge, Clara asked the question that had echoed between them since the beginning. Do you fear my touch now, Cole? He pulled her onto his lap, holding her close. I crave it more with each passing day. Your touch, your presence, your love, they're what transformed this exile into a homecoming. For both of us, she murmured against his lips. The desert night wrapped around them, vast and eternal, holding their small oasis of love and hope in its ancient embrace. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and joys, but tonight, under the infinite stars, two people who had found each other against all odds celebrated the life they were building together, one sunrise at a time. The wedding took place on a crisp October morning. with the desert painted in autumn golds and the sky so blue it hurt to look at. Reverend Thomas, a circuit preacher who'd happened through the territory at just the right time, performed the ceremony in the shade of the ancient cottonwoods near the spring. It wasn't a large gathering. Sheriff Briggs stood as Cole's witness, while Mrs. Mills had traveled from town to stand with Clara. Mrs. Patterson had come too, bringing her husband and eldest daughter. A handful of others had made the journey, people who'd come to respect what Clara and Cole represented, the triumph of love over fear, truth over convenient lies. Clara wore a simple blue dress she'd sewn herself, with wild flowers from her garden woven into her hair. Cole had never seen anything more beautiful than her smile as she walked toward him, radiant with joy and certainty. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Thomas began, his voice carrying across the desert stillness, "we gather in this place of natural beauty to witness something equally beautiful, the joining of two souls who found each other in the wilderness and chose to make it bloom." The vows were simple, heartfelt. Cole's voice was rough with emotion as he promised to love, honor, and cherish. Clara's eyes never left his as she pledged the same, adding softly, "You saved me in every way a person can be saved. Now let me spend the rest of my days saving you right back." When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, the small gathering erupted in cheers that echoed off the canyon walls. Cole kissed his bride, feeling as if his heart might burst from the fullness of the moment. The celebration that followed was modest but joyful. Mrs. Patterson had brought a cake, somehow surviving the journey intact. Sheriff Briggs produced a fiddle from his saddlebags and proved surprisingly talented, filling the air with lively tunes that had even the most reserved guests dancing. As the sun began its descent, painting long shadows across the desert floor, the guests prepared to leave. Mrs. Mills embraced Clara tightly. "Be happy, dear friend. You've earned it 1,000 times over." "What about you?" Clara asked, concern creasing her brow. "Will you be safe?" Mrs. Mills smiled, a new strength in her bearing. "I've left him, took your courage and made it mine. I'm staying with my sister now, starting over." She squeezed Clara's hands. "Your example showed me it was possible. Thank you for that." As the last of the guests disappeared into the distance, Clara and Cole stood together, watching the sunset transform the desert into a canvas of fire and shadow. "Mrs. Danner," Cole said experimentally, grinning when Clara laughed. "Mr. Danner," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "Shall we go home?" Their cabin had been transformed for the occasion. Clara had hung white curtains she'd sewn, and wildflower bouquets graced every surface. It was still the same simple structure, but love had made it beautiful. That night, as they lay entwined in their marriage bed, Clara traced patterns on Cole's chest, marveling at how far they'd come. "Do you remember what I asked you that night during the storm?" she murmured. "Whether you feared my touch or craved it." "I remember everything about you," he replied, catching her hand and bringing it to his lips. "Every word, every look, every moment that brought us here." "And now? What's your answer now?" He rolled them so he could look down at her, his eyes dark with love and desire. "Now I know that your touch is what makes me whole, that craving you is like craving air, essential, life-giving, eternal." She pulled him down for a kiss that was answer and promise and celebration all at once. Outside, the desert night sang its ancient songs, but inside their home, two people who'd been broken by the world wrote their own song of healing and hope. The weeks that followed brought a peace deeper than either had known. Clara's garden flourished, providing vegetables that supplemented their simple meals. Cole added the promised room to the cabin, with large windows that flooded the space with light. They worked side by side, building not just a home, but a life rich with purpose and joy. One evening, as winter began to whisper across the desert, bringing cooler nights and spectacular sunsets, they received an unexpected visitor. A young Apache woman appeared at their door, her eyes wary but determined. "You are the woman who ensures fair contracts?" she asked Clara in accented English. "I am. How can I help you?" The woman explained that her village had received spoiled grain in their last shipment, that children were hungry because of it. Clara's expression hardened with resolve. "We'll fix this, Cole. Will you ride with me to the reservation tomorrow?" "Always." They spent the next days sorting out the corruption that had crept back into the supply chain with Fleming gone. Clara's meticulous records and fierce advocacy ensured the Apache received what they were owed, along with compensation for what had been stolen. Standing in the reservation, watching children eat their fill of good bread made from untainted grain, Cole felt a pride in his wife that went bone deep. She'd taken her pain and transformed it into purpose, her suffering into strength for others. "You're remarkable," he told her as they rode home. "You know that?" "I'm just doing what's right." But she smiled at the praise. Samuel's money might as well do some good in the world. Lord knows it never did when he was alive. As Christmas approached, their first as husband and wife, the cabin glowed with warmth and contentment. Clara had made decorations from desert plants and bright cloth, while Cole had crafted furniture to make their expanded home more comfortable. On Christmas Eve, as snow, rare and magical in the desert, began to fall, they sat by the fire, sharing quiet conversation and dreams for the future. "I want children someday," Clara said softly. "Little ones to fill this home with laughter, to grow up free and unafraid under this big sky." "I'd like that," Cole agreed, picturing it. Small versions of Clara with her green eyes and fierce spirit, running through the desert, learning to be brave and kind and true. "As many as you want." "Careful what you promise. Mr. Danner, I might want a whole passel of them." "Then we'd better add more rooms." They laughed, the sound bright in the winter night. Outside, the snow continued to fall, transforming the harsh desert into something soft and magical. But the real magic was inside, where two people who'd thought themselves beyond redemption had found salvation in each other's arms. As the fire burned low, Clara asked one final time, a tradition now between them, "Do you fear my touch or crave it?" Cole pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, marveling as always that she was real and here in his. "I crave it more than life itself. Your touch is home. Clara, it's peace. It's everything I never knew I was looking for until I found you dying in the desert and discovered I'd been the one dying all along." "We saved each other," she whispered, echoing words they'd shared before. "And now we get to live, really live. Forever, forever." The fire crackled its agreement, casting dancing shadows on the walls of their home. Outside, the desert slept under its blanket of snow, peaceful and eternal, and in a cabin built by a man seeking solitude. Two souls who'd found each other against all odds celebrated not just their love, but their triumph over everything that had tried to break them. They'd faced down prejudice and violence, overcome trauma and fear, chosen hope over bitterness and love over safety. Their scars remained, but no longer defined them. Instead, those scars had become proof of their strength, reminders of how far they'd come. As they drifted toward sleep in each other's arms, Clara murmured, "Thank you. For what? For seeing me that day. Not the widow witch or the fallen woman or any of the other things they called me, just me, and for thinking I was worth saving." Cole kissed her forehead tenderly. "Thank you for being worth saving, and for saving me right back." The snow continued to fall, blanketing the desert in pristine white, covering the harsh edges and unforgiving surfaces with gentleness. It was, Clara thought drowsily, a perfect metaphor for what love had done to their lives, taken the harsh and unforgiving and transformed it into something beautiful. In the morning, they would wake to a world made new. They would tend their animals, work their garden, welcome any who came seeking help or hope. They would build their life day by day, season by season, year by year, filling the desert with love and laughter and the quiet courage of ordinary people choosing extraordinary love. But for now, they slept, safe in each other's arms, while the desert kept its ancient watch and the stars bore witness to their contentment. Two souls who'd been lost had found their way home, not to a place, but to each other. And in that finding, they discovered that love could indeed conquer all, not in grand gestures or dramatic proclamations, but in the quiet choice, made daily, to face the world together. The widow and the cowboy, the broken and the banished, had become simply Clara and Cole Danner, proof that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the smallest acts of kindness, and that, even in the harshest desert, with courage and compassion, love can bloom eternal. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through the Arizona territory with Clara and Cole. We hope their story of love triumphing over adversity has touched your heart as much as it touched ours to tell it. Where are you listening to this tale tonight? Drop a comment below and let us know, whether you're by a cozy fireplace, on a long drive, or perhaps even under the stars like our desert lovers. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more stories of romance, redemption, and adventure in the American frontier. Share your thoughts about Clara and Cole's journey in the comments. We'd love to hear what moments moved you most. Until next time, partners, keep riding toward your own sunset. Happy trails.